this podcast the only way we can. Obviously, Brad Holmes talked today. There was a lot he said in that press conference that was just it was actually pretty. It was a pretty good listen. If you could get a chance, go on the Lions YouTube page and you could look that up and watch it in full. He gave a lot of good tidbits. I'll give you the tidbits right away. But it all in all, he did a damn good job. But Detroit has one pick. They have two picks in the top 100, and then they have one outside the top 100, which is 102. And then they have they have five picks in the top 200. So that's pretty good. It might get the deal done. But all in all, the Detroit Lions will be they will be picking at 28 as of now, but I imagine that will go up as we get closer to the NFL draft, and they might trade up. There's always a possibility, but the teams that are probably looking to trade down, the Falcons, the Vikings, because I think the Vikings have 4 picks, and the Falcons have 5 picks, and they're in the NFC. They might not want to help the Detroit Lions out in terms of getting a good player, and then you got to weigh the Vikings are picking. I think they're picking 24. So that pick that you're going to trade up for is only 4 picks away. I mean, that could be you could probably get it for a value, but who are you getting at that point? And would Minnesota even trade with you, knowing that you're going to be going head to head in the division? And obviously, they have traded with Detroit before, but things can change matter quickly. Let's get to what Brad Holmes said today. So Brad Holmes was talking to the media today. He gave a couple quotes that I want to give you right now. He talked about trading up. He said, on trading up, I know that we did the Jameson Williams trade. That was pretty far up there from where we were at, Holmes said. That hasn't been the only year that we've attempted to do that. Not at that specific position, but just for a player. And it takes 2 to do a trade, and there are some teams that just don't want to go that far back, and so it takes 2. What Brad Holmes is saying is it takes 2 to tango. And sometimes you want to trade with the team. You want to trade up for a draft pick. You want to go and you want to make that trade. It often doesn't happen like that. And, I harken back to something someone said in another market. John Schneider, the Seattle Seahawks general manager, he said something very, very interesting. He was going to trade up in a draft. He was contacting the team. They're about to trade up. And then all of a sudden, before it happened, the trade didn't go through because they saw a player that was high up on their board that they ended up picking. It's an interesting dynamic when you get to that point, but it is very, very interesting when you see something like that happen. But that is something that can happen when you're trading up or you're trading down. Things can happen. It takes 2 to make a deal. Like all trades, it takes 2 to make a deal. When we were talking the Max Crosby thing, we were talking the Trey Hendrickson thing. Anybody you want to trade, yes, you want to trade for that player or you want to trade for that draft pick. It does not mean that you're going to get that player or that draft pick. So that's always the interesting part about this whole deal. On Zadarius Smith, he said, we haven't had any discussion since I spoke about him last month, and I think we kind of left it as it is, that his agent would let us know if something was going on or anything had changed or if we had any updates, Holmes said. But no, we haven't had any discussions since. So my line of reading into this, and you could read what you want into it, but what I think is happening is if the Detroit Lions get to draft a player that they like at the edge position, if there's an edge that they value, which we'll get to in a minute, but if there's an edge that they value in the draft, they're going to draft that player, and they're not going to worry about Zadarius Smith. Now, if they don't get to draft the edge player that they want, they're not going to draft him. And if just drafting an edge player because you want an edge player doesn't equate to results. It just doesn't. I wish it did, but it doesn't. That's the way this NFL draft works and all that jazz. Sometimes the players that you like the most aren't, if they're a position of need, you're like, all right, let's go for it. If they're not a position of need, you're like, we got enough guys in that area. But as I always say, when you're drafting, it's for the future and now, and you kind of have to middle ground it. Because, last year, I looked it up. There was 42 players that started on opening day from that that draft. That was a high number. If you go back 3 or 4 years, I think it was 30, and then it was 25, and then it was 23. So very rarely do you see. Uh, it depends on the draft, and from all the experts' opinions, you're probably going to see 25 to 30 start in this draft, including the quarterbacks. So that's a very interesting number. But what is happening with the Zadarius Smith is they're going to allow it to play out. And Zadarius Smith isn't going to sign somewhere where, let's put it this way, there might be someone trying to take his job because he's a veteran. He's got some stuff to give, and he's going to wait it out. And obviously, with the draft, if let's say you have a decision between the Patriots and the Lions, and the Lions come to you and they say, we didn't draft an edge player, we drafted him in the third round, he won't compete to start this year. So Darius Smith is probably going to go with you over the Patriots, or vice versa. That's how it works. And especially with all the free agents that are available right now, like you hear with Aaron Rodgers, like he's open to playing, but he's going to wait it out too. He's going to wait it out. Who doesn't get a quarterback, and where do I go from here? Because obviously, if you're a team and you're drafting a quarterback and Aaron Rodgers is there's a chance that he can get a little bit upset, just like Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix last year. So those are some of the things that can happen. So with Zadarius Smith, that's a guy who they're going to circle back on that, and they're going to go, okay, we're going to do this the right way, and we're not going to, if we get an edge player we like, we're going to draft him. If we don't get the edge player we like, we can always circle back to Zadarius and say, come on home. I know your girlfriend lives here. It's going to be good. So that's what he said about Zadarius Smith. Now, it was interesting because a lot of people that, are Lions fans, they think that Brad Holmes is going to choose on need. He's never chosen on need ever in his illustrious Detroit Lions general manager career. He's never chosen on need. But he said this about the best player available. He said, this is where I get annoyed, but sometimes don't understand the whole need thing, because with each season ends, it's going to be something else, Holmes said. Another player's contract's going to end. Another player's, unfortunately, might be coming off an injury, like it's going to be something different every single offseason. So if you're trying to chase what happened last season of, oh man, this guy's contract's come up, you're trying to chase, oh, this guy's got an injury. You're just kind of getting into a cycle that I think is a little bit dangerous to get into. So that's why I've been more of just get the best player. And as we've seen with Brett Holmes, he will not just draft on need. He'll draft on the best player available. Harken back to last year, the draft. He drafted 2 cornerbacks back to back in Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw. If you go back, to the first draft of Brett Holmes, he drafted Aleem McNeil and Levi Onwuzurike back to back. Levi Onwuzurike was first, McNeil was second. That was in the second, third round. But it's obviously shown that he does draft the best available player. If you look at his drafts over the course of the 4 drafts that he's been here, you can see that, he doubled up in corner in year 4. He got another safety in year 3 with Brian Branch, which they don't play the same position, so it's fine. He drafted Jahmyr Gibbs same year that he got Dave Montgomery, so he took the best player available right there. He went and traded up for J-Mo. He drafted 3 safeties in 3 separate years. So that just shows you what Brad Holmes is all about. And he drafted 2 defensive tackles back to back in the first year of his draft. So that shows you everything you need to know about Brad Holmes. He's not going to draft on need. He's just not. The reality of the situation is, when you draft on need, there's a potential that when you draft that player, when you draft the player that you say you need, sometimes you get lost in the sauce. Sometimes you pass up on a player that you don't want to pass up on. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes you take a guy that you need. You say, I need an edge guy, right? And then the next thing you know, you're going down the road and you're like, the guy that you passed up on went to a division rival and you thought he was a good player, but you needed this guy. Or if he goes to the division rival and he becomes a Hall of Fame player, you kind of lost out on that. So that's kind of the thing that you get with the whole best player available and everything like that. And it was interesting because the thing this week was Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas. He was on a visit with the Detroit Lions, and a lot of people are tying his name to Detroit and all that jazz. I mean, he just took a visit. Visits can be like, I want to know more about this player. That's all visits are pretty much. But when you get a visit from a guy like Matthew Golden, it's very, very interesting. But it is what it is. Uh, on the wide receiver competition, now this is an interesting one because, as we said I just tied into it. Matthew Golden did visit the Detroit Lions, and this is what he said about the wide receiver competition. He said it's kind of like we talk about with corner. You really can't have near enough of them, and obviously receiver it's similar. Holmes said. Now the only thing about receiver is that I always felt like receiver is probably one of the more voluminous positions in each draft. There's probably more of those guys. Even veteran free agents are available after the draft as well. But yeah, I mean, you just have to add one. Just continue to add youth. We're happy with the guys we have. Very happy with the guys that we have. But obviously, it'd be great to have one, to get one. So again, Brad Holmes shows that he is not a guy that's going to give you any kind of information. Obviously, he could have said, I do want to draft a wide receiver. And I don't think he's coy on drafting a wide receiver. If there's a wide receiver that he sees at 28, he's going to pick that guy. If he sees a guy at 60 that he values, he's going to pick that guy. If there's a guy at 102 or 130 or 196 and he thinks that they could help the team, he's going to pick that player. That's what Brad Holmes has done all throughout his Detroit Lions general manager tenure. And he has shown the ability to say, look, I got St. Brown the year before. I'm going to get JMO this time. And vice versa. Like he's open to adding anywhere possible because when you draft, it's not just for this year. I think a lot of people, they always get lost in draft picks have to contribute right away. And I would love a draft pick to contribute right away, but like a guy like Giovanni Manu, right? Giovanni is probably going to be a guy that's going to develop, and then probably in a year you're probably going to expect him to compete for a starting job or something like that. But that's what you do in the draft is you try to draft for now and in the future, and you got to weigh the consequences of if you draft a guy like Giovanni Manu, you could be passing on a player who could really help you. So it's interesting. Or when they drafted Hendon Hooker, it's the same thing. They thought he would develop into a great player, or maybe a good backup or something like that. And now he's competing with Kyle Allen for the backup position. That's kind of the thing that you weigh in these drafts. And every draft is different. Like obviously, if it's a weaker draft, you're gonna kind of go, okay, well, if this guy Hendon Hooker is available, I'll take him over this guy. Or if a Broderick Martin is available, or Giovanni Manu, you'll take him. It's interesting every time, and you're hoping that over the course of time it shows its face that look, this guy, what he drafted, it actually worked out. All right, let's get to pass rushers because he talked about pass rushers too. He said, I won't get into specifics or details of the actual players, but I know that some will go before our pick. Some might be available at our pick. There might be an opportunity to trade back, and that position is there. But yeah, there's some really good football players there. And look, Brad Holmes is not going to tell you who he's going to go pick, especially during this time of the year where GMs are sending smoke screens galore. I mean, Joe Shane of the New York Giants, which I think he's a total douche and a kind of an idiot, but he said, I don't need I could draft a quarterback. I don't need to draft a quarterback. Dude, you need to draft a quarterback. The Giants are a pretty bad team. So that is what it is. But it comes down to a couple things, and that's just what you do. And you're hoping for your sake that you get a guy who could potentially be someone that you could, you don't have to trade up for, or is going to fall on your lap, and that would be great. But that would be fantastic if you could be able to do that. So Brett Holmes isn't going to give you information on trading up for a pass rusher or who the pass rushers he likes, but when you do a mock draft and you see the guys that go ahead of you, guys like if you go to the full, I just did a Pro Football Focus mock draft, and Jihad Campbell went number 9, Shamar Stewart went number 11. You have guys like Michael Williams went number 14, Mike Green, the Cardinals at 16. These are things that could happen where there's just a run of defensive ends that go off the board. Even a guy like Donovan Azuruku from Boston College went off the board. So if you look at the edges that are available, when I did this like little mock draft, James Pierce is available, Nick Scorton's available, Landon Jackson's available. And there's a lot of guys that are available, but who is the best at that position? Because when you talk about the best at that position, that's kind of what Brett Holmes is going to try to do. And right now, and when I did that little exercise of who is the best player available on the board, this is what you get. You get Malachi Starks, the safety. He's one of the best players on the board. Luther Bolden, Burden from the wide receiver from Missouri. James Pierce, Omarion Hampton, Omar Norman Lott, the defensive lineman from Tennessee, and Gray Zabel, a tackle from North Dakota State. So these are some of the things that can happen, where you're sitting at 28 and all of a sudden there's a run on edge players. And then you're like, what the hell? Even a guy like Tyler Booker went a pick before they went at 26 to the Rams. So you could have it all in your mind what's going to happen, but the reality of the situation is you don't know how the draft is going to play out. And Holmes said that in his press conference. He said, just get your popcorn ready. And that's kind of what you get with this. So it is what it is. I was interested what he said about Holmes on character. Now, he talked about character, and this is what he said in his press conference. He said, in terms of character evaluation, I wish it was easy as seeing the headline, Holmes said. He said there's so much more depth and detail and research that's involved. It's literally, I tell our scouts, in terms of character, it's year-round. It's the house you got to build year-round, and it leads all the way up to the draft, really. I've always said it's a case-by-case everything that you may read may not be what actually happened. And that's actual details of it, whatever the case is. But that's just it. It's case by case, but it's a lot of depth and it's a lot of research. What he's saying right there about character, there's a guy that's out there, James Pierce. There's character issues. There's red flags that are coming with James Pierce. There's red flags that are coming with Mike Green. There might be other guys that are in the draft that, there's character issues coming with them. But what Brad Holmes is saying is, like, you can't read the headline. You have to look at the full picture, and you have to get a good glimpse of it. And these NFL teams, they have a lot of things at their disposal in terms of they can go to a guy like, they can go to their head of security who might be an ex-CIA agent, an ex-FBI agent, and they might get really good intel on a certain player, or they might know someone in that department, or they might know someone that was involved in the case or something like that. Those are the things that can happen. That's why he says it's a case-by-case basis, and you don't really read the headlines because Brad Holmes can't read the headlines. He has to read the whole picture, and that's how it goes. But it is what it is. But that's what Holmes said today. Obviously, he's not going to give out any information. Like, you usually will see some guys give out some information at the draft, and usually those are the worst general managers. So when you see a guy like Brett Holmes perfectly stay coy and not give you any information, that's not by the wayside. But it is what some of these guys do. All right, let's get to next on the podcast. Let's get to the mock drafts. There's a couple mock drafts I wanted to go over with you guys. Obviously, if you're listening on the podcast, Detroit Lions News podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, you're on YouTube, you're on Twitter. If you missed this, you can go back. I think we'll clip this too, so you guys can go into it.